a very special welcome to two special guests for this episode of Cloud and Clear. This Cloud and Clear is all about healthcare life sciences. I have two, arguably foremost experts in the space, all together on one video chat. It's a special honor to have Chris Sakalosky, Managing Director of Healthcare Life Sciences, Google Cloud and Alphabet. Welcome,
Thank you
Chris.
very much. Good to see you, Tony. Good to see you, Michael.
And also our very own Healthcare Life Sciences Senior Director, Michael Ames. Welcome
Thanks,
both.
Tony. Great to be here.
Good. I see we're all dressed up for the occasion.
Got out of the hoodie and sweats.
This is Friday during a pandemic, and we're all wearing,
at least from the waist up.
Yeah, it's true. This is all we can see is from here up. But Chris Sakalosky and I go way, way back, pretty far back now in the Google ecosystem. But even prior to that, when SADA was deep in the Microsoft business, and Chris was at Microsoft, also in healthcare, we were very active in that space, and we met at HIMSS. And so we go way farther back than our Google sort of relationships would represent. And it's just really great to be able to continue to work with awesome people, breaking new ground day after day. And Michael Ames, I met also at HIMSS while he was not yet at SADA, and I saw him present about all the work that he'd done around patient informatics and data, patient information on Google Cloud, maybe before anyone else was doing it. And I saw him on stage, and he's also really funny. And I said, I think he'll do well at SADA, and I pursued him really hard, and finally convinced him to come. All right, so this has been a very crazy last 12 months, 9 months. Chris, Michael, I think we feel like we've been called upon at Google and at SADA, especially in healthcare, because we've been all thrown into this midst of this human healthcare crisis, a global crisis. And one of the things I'm most proud of, Chris, is how actually Google has responded and enabled its partners to respond. So what has it been like in the last 9 months, being inside of Google, helping and working on the global?
Yeah, I liked what you said about the calling. I think there's something, if the last 12 months didn't scare you away from healthcare, nothing will. And I think there's a lot of resolve for everyone on the front line. So I think we all tip our caps to the frontline workers that are out there. We did our part. And I think we have great partners like SADA who recognized an opportunity to serve and not sell, really understand what they were trying to accomplish. As the pandemic started in its early days, there was a lot of requests for data. Obviously, Google, being who we are, had an opportunity to help in that regard. Then the next phase of the pandemic hit, and Michael had been talking like, okay, they have the data now. What are they going to do with it? How are they going to make the next logical decisions, the right decisions? How are they going to share that information? And we really got to work. One of the things I'm most proud of is the work that we did with SADA, with one of our larger healthcare providers in the South, that was actually in conjunction with the White House. And just to watch the level of not just Google and Google Cloud, but to watch all the assets across SADA, across Alphabet, and quite frankly, the entire industry. We were working with peers and competitors in the marketplace. And I think that's what I was most proud of, is the way the community came together, Tony, at the end of the day. And Google did its part, and I was proud of that.
Yeah, and I would plus one to our gratitude to the frontline workers, because they're putting their personal health at risk. Another piece, though, that sometimes goes less noticed in the general public is how comprehensively the pandemic affected the healthcare industry, back behind those frontline workers, to the administration staff, to the IT staff, to the accountants, to everyone, right? Hospitals have had to make huge changes. They've had to alter the way that they work. And in some cases, they've been really busy, but they haven't been busy in a way that makes money for them. And so those of us who are in the business of trying to help hospitals be more successful have had to pivot and work to help them to pivot and work to figure out how to do remote staffing for their non-clinical workforce. How do they handle even just being flexible in things like billing and thinking creatively about getting access to servers and systems and data. Anyone in the healthcare industry this year has had a tough year, with the frontline workers at the top of that iceberg and entire organizational support systems down below. And it's been great to be able to work with Google and be part of providing support for those people.
Yeah, with Google, we feel like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, with regards to not only the cultural leadership we see, like how does Google respond in a crisis, but the technology leadership, the resources. So we just love that association and how it brings out the best in all of us. Healthcare was suffering before, like as a vertical, right? Like as an industry. Chris, you've been in the industry for a long time. Michael, you have to working on the inside as well. Like it was tough before the pandemic.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, there's a couple of points you could draw from your statement. So number one, there's a lot of inequities in health. And I think we all recognize what those are. And as we come together as partners, and what Michael and I often talk about this, how do we use technology for good? How do we enable providers, payers, pharmaceutical and life science companies, these med device manufacturers to bridge that divide, to drive, the engagement across what are today current inequities and chasms. Now, the technology chasms are closing, and I think the pandemic did a lot of that. As Michael talked about, you saw a lot of these hospitals have to shift and rethink what their engagement model was, right? They physically had to meet with many of their elective consumers and patients remotely, or some blend of digital and physical. And so, figuring what that would look like out, because not everyone has a home Wi-Fi and internet connection. And how would you work with public and private places to bring Wi-Fi to communities? How would you then, once you've got that, how do you partner with, the likes of Google and SADA and others to bring that digital framework together? Like Michael said, so much changed on them, but it wasn't changed necessarily for the better. It actually put more pressure on an already pressured system where the profits aren't that great. And the way we're set up in the U.S. economy, health is always under pressure, especially for our care delivery providers. And so just watching the pandemic and its impact on that, I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout the course of the day. That's probably one of the greatest takeaways, is what the pandemic did is it fundamentally pushed several of these conversational lines across a chasm. Right, that digital connection point, how technology is used, this concept of digital front doors or digital entry points, and then how do we rethink the way data and analytics are used, not just for clinical support and service of a patient, but also on the operational side. And so many of these elements will come out in the next 2-3 years that I think Michael and I are very, very excited about.
Yeah, I agree. And that, I think I feel a little bit guilty about this sometimes, to be honest. But the truth is that those of us who've been working in healthcare technology for a long time have had a few objectives that have been really hard to make happen. And if I could Control Z undo the pandemic in 2020, I would absolutely do that. But in the absence of that big button, there are a couple of good things that will have come out of this transformation. Our best guesses are that in the middle of 2019, about 4% of people aged 50 or over had any kind of telehealth experience. Today, that number is well over 50%. So the fact is that's an experience that all of us now are going to start having as a regular part of our lives when we engage in the healthcare system. And it's something that a lot of us have been wanting to happen a long time. I wish it didn't take a pandemic to help get us there. But if we're looking for silver linings, accelerating the adoption of technology that helps clinicians get access to patients and vice versa. Like Chris was talking about, people in rural communities, folks who are already at home, folks who are most comfortable at home, who might find it difficult to go into a doctor's office, or who are concerned about communicable diseases and things that they might find in the course of a hospital visit. This is an excellent thing that has come out of it. We will see a drop back down. We're in sort of a surge of telehealth that will drop back down somewhat, but it's not going away. And ultimately, it's for the better for the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I think this new way of functioning, especially in the context of this very highly regulated industry, not only highly regulated, but with a bunch of stakeholders. We have the payers, providers, the federal government, and so on. Sometimes it's very hard to instill change, right? Until something drastic happens. And so there's often not even legislation to cover some things that are going on. So it's like, okay, an emergency will do this, but can we really keep doing this? So I'm glad you kind of went down the path of this question, Michael, because I was going to ask both you and Chris this question is, how much of what we're seeing we feel like will be the precipice for sort of permanent change, the seed for permanent change, and how much of this is, oh, when, we'll just go back to how it was.
Yeah, I'll double down on something Michael said. While the pandemic forced a lot of virtual connection points between the payer, provider, pharma and life sciences and med device communities with their consumers and patients and members, you'll see some normalization of that. But from those 4% thresholds to the 91 or 2% that I think were in some of the publications, you're still going to settle back in that 50, 60% range. And it's going to be across the broad spectrum of health. I think you'll see telehealth will continue to emerge and stay a part of that fabric, Tony, is one, right? I think folks realize that with the regulation changes looking like they'll be permanent, the ability to practice across borders is going to open up the opportunity for both the traditional providers that we know today, as well as new disruptive players in the marketplace, to provide new based consumer services to meet consumers where they are. And I think that's what's exciting, is it opened up that frame. But things that'll also stay. I mean, listen, we just witnessed drug companies release and distribute a vaccination that would normally takes 4, 6 to 8 years. And, tens of billions of dollars. They did it in a third the time or less, and they did it with at half the cost. And they used data as the nuclear reactor behind it. They used digital and physical work across the organizations. To Michael's point, it wasn't just scientists. There's all the other people that go behind it, the logistics folks, the supply chain folks, and they were all using new methods of collaboration and communication. And that for me, as a stakeholder here, is what I was so proud of the community for. We just played a small part, but again, just being so proud of the community and to answer your question, where I think we're going, this is just the beginning. So never let a crisis go to waste. And this really, I think, vaulted us forward.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that we can say enough in praise of the scientists and researchers who pulled off that vaccine. The polio vaccine was 100 years between the idea of it and the actual implementation of it. 100 years, which is why I chuckle when people say, "Well, I'm not sure about this, this vaccine. Do we know that vaccines are going to be safe? We've done this for a long, long time, right? This vaccine is new, but we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We've got great science and technology behind it, and the research was absolutely enabled by technology that let those teams work together efficiently and remotely, right? And that's really exciting. There's some other things that have been pushed forward. The Google Health Research app is a thing that you can go download now. So I've spent a lot of years supporting clinical research and processes like how you find patients who might be appropriate for your research, how you gather their consent to pursue it, how you gather the data that you need from them and then get it in a place where you can analyze and do it. Each one of those process steps is a set of difficult challenges that this app has now consolidated into one place. Now, I'm going to admit, I downloaded it a week ago because I was thinking about it for this podcast. Half an hour ago, I started it up and logged in and made my first clicks. And within 15 minutes, I'm enrolled in a clinical study that knows about me, that is collecting data, that is going to send me reminders to fill in more data. And it's around health research and COVID-19 and respiratory issues. And so now I'm part of something, and I literally never left this couch. Right?
Yeah, it's funny. I did the same thing with the Verily Baseline application. And again, it's the beauty about being a part of Alphabet. There are over 50 different operating investments inside the company that we get to take advantage of and bring to bear. And I think that's, as we saw the pandemic hit, it's like you saw all of those things activate at once. Again, in a somber way, though, it's like my eyes got wide open and I'm like, I really understand now why I'm here, what our purpose is, and how we can tackle some of these hardest challenges. Because Michael, all the things you said that you did from your couch that sound so easy, there are real steps that go into this, and the platforms that those are built on, like the Healthcare and Life Sciences API. It sounds like the most mundane, boring thing on the planet, and yet it's the fabric to do that consent management and to make sure that you're handling the privacy of that information and making that data interoperable so that it's not just using like sort of a one-way between the app and the data store on the other side. It actually allows the patient, the consumer, the caregivers, teams, you can share that with a wide audience. That is actually what allows us to do the things like bring drugs to market faster through research, discovery, and delivery, right? That's the kind of that partnership that we have. And again, it's just one of those things where you say, wow, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm here now. And I'm glad I have the assets available to us to think through all of these different scenarios, because they are not easy. And the fact that you can do it from your couch, or Tony or I, or anyone else for that matter, it's mind blowing to think where we were maybe 5-6 years ago and where we are today.
It's awesome. It's exciting. Chris, your comments made me think of something that I wanted to ask. Tony, is it okay if I hit up Chris with a question here?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to monopolize all the questions.
I mean, you're the expert, right? So you just mentioned, Chris, a number of different sort of parallel kinds of investments and ways that Google, and if we think more broadly, Alphabet, is working in healthcare. And people hear about Google Cloud, and they hear about things like the Healthcare API. They hear about Verily. They hear about Google Health. And I think sometimes it's not always clear what are all these different pots of people doing, and how do they coordinate, and how do we who are in the business of trying to bring technology to the healthcare and life sciences industry to help them get to the next level, how should we be understanding and thinking about Google's investments and how we engage at those different levels?
Yeah, I'll speak it from a Google Cloud vantage point, but I'll also give you my observations, my aperture for all of Alphabet. First and foremost, without ever breaking open the semantic debate of what is a solution and what is not a solution, I view Google Cloud as a solution-based platform where our job is to work at a platform level with our solutions to bring real life value to our customers and our partners, and ultimately their customers and partners, which could be the end consumer, it could be the government, and it could be large pharma, the payer providers, et cetera. We work at that platform level to bring all of that plumbing work that you need done. That's that layer. Think of it like a layer cake. That's that first layer, and that's Google Cloud. And Tony, you used the word sitting on the shoulders of giants. Guess what I get to do? I get to sit on the shoulders of a giant known as Google, with its hyperscale fabric, its hyperscale compute platform. And so I get to put not only the Google Cloud platform layer on top of that cake, I also get to put the healthcare and life sciences layer on top of that. So we start bridging from platform to solution platform, right? Where we start to enable those types of connectivities, Michael, like we talked about, right? The ability to do natural language processing, the ability to ingest data and make it usable, the ability to drive insights. And then you start to layer on top of that Alphabet, right? All of what Alphabet brings, where they may have connected, fully baked chronic disease management programs, end to end. And we will work across that stack. Or we might be working with one of our partners from a clinical trial, a virtual clinical trial perspective, and they bring that final layer of IP on top. The key is the ability to execute. We're very clear on our role. We're really clear on our role as an enabler, as a business partner. And so we look to remove the friction points as a platform provider, yet we understand and can execute on the full solution, both with first party and our third party assets. And that's again, what I'm so proud of, and really why I chose to come to Google, because it does have that deep reach, not just within Google, not just within Google Cloud, but across that entire Alphabet ecosystem. And it's a pleasure working with them every day. I tell you, it really is.
Sometimes what it seems like from the outside is that you've got pieces of Google that are going for the moonshots, right? I remember several years ago when Verily was talking about contact lenses that would help with diabetes management. Things like, I would say 99% of the healthcare industry is not doing, and doesn't have direct relevance to what most of us are doing, but they sort of serve to help us to see what is possible if we get the data together, if we have the right platforms, if we have the right analytics, if we have the right kind of outside the box thinking, what can we actually do with it? And so sometimes what we need is a little bit of inspiration, And some of those things are coming out of other places within Google. Part of, I think, like you, what I enjoy about working with Google Cloud specifically is that's where the rubber hits the road. This is where we can actually build things. And it's not that we're not building things on Google Cloud that aren't equally exciting. We're working with a company right now that is trying to do things like improve the accuracy of in-home clinician patient visits. So doctors who are visiting people who are shut up in their homes, and they've got to collect all kinds of information and data from them. Often they've got a big box of medicines, and it takes a long time to go through those one at a time and click or type them in and figure out how to, make sure that you're accurately capturing all of that data. And we're working with Google Cloud technology to let us pull out a pill box, put it in front of a camera on a mobile app, rotate that box around. We pull off that text using we capture the image using one Google API. We pull off the text using another API. We process it through some standardized medical terminology processing capability on another API. And what we get out of the end is this structured, highly accurate view of all of the medications that this patient is taking, without that clinician having to spend 20, 30 minutes going through these one at a time. It seems in some ways mundane, but then you take that and you multiply that across hundreds of thousands or millions of these visits happening in a home, and you have now something that has a substantial impact on the quality and the efficiency of care for lots and lots of people, right? So we may be inspired by science fiction dreams, but then we can come to Google Cloud and build stuff today that works, and frankly, without a lot of lines of code in order to sow those.
Listen, that's where we put our flag in the ground, Michael. Absolutely. I mean, listen, history, right, innovation has zero reverence for your history. Zero, right? In order to stay an innovator, you have to innovate. It is a fact. And so one of the reasons why Google does what it does, why Alphabet does what it does from an innovation perspective, is to bring the art of the possible to the table. Now, by the way, with that same comes a healthy irreverence for failure, because you're seeking the learnings, not necessarily the product on the output. And so when I'm working with customers every day, they always ask, how should we think about working with you and with your partners like SADA, who seem to be focused on the ready and the now with an eye towards the future, versus how would we work with other divisions? And what we always say is, listen, we were brought here. Thomas Kurian put us on the map to help bridge that gap, to take a look at what the art of the possible is and understand what's disrupting businesses and marketplaces in the enterprise, in the consumer market, whether it be retail, consumer packaged goods, healthcare. Digest and understand what's happening there and start to connect some of these moonshot concepts with real world practical problems, things that are harder than your average technology hyperscaler cloud company is going to go tackle. Take the learnings from those and then work with the customers to get them ready for when that moonshot is ready, and bring those two worlds together. That is really at the core of what we do. And while you'll never see it on a mission statement, it's usually the greatest bit of advice I give customers and our own people to what they can do, right, to help customers be more innovative, is to help them get ready. And that, again, like you said, sometimes it starts with the mundane, and sometimes it's just getting your data state in order. It's putting the right technologies in place to do it. But you'll quickly realize, as you set that foundation and you start to execute, those things pile up really quick. And then you can bring that innovation in together. And I think that's where the magic really happens.
And I think it's important that we not underestimate the value of the mundane. I hate using that word, but the value of the mundane at scale it can be tremendously valuable. So a lot of the work that we have done in the last year with Google in the healthcare industry has been extending and expanding and helping to grow the Google Workspace footprint, what we used to call G Suite, and enabling all of those back office folks at healthcare organizations to be able to work together, communicate, collaborate more efficiently. When we're talking about, robobiotic contact lenses and magical vision APIs and machine learning and things, sometimes it seems like, and you want to offer me a good word processor too? Is this really exciting? But those are the things, those are the fundamentals that enable these organizations to innovate. Again, going back to the vaccine, all this vaccine study and development was, for the most part, not done with a bunch of researchers looking at each other in conference rooms. They were in their own homes, like the three of us are today, collaborating online like we are today with documents and spreadsheets and cloud-based databases and everything else to enable what then was this transformational biomedical breakthrough built on mundane pieces of technology simply built really well and deployed at scale. So there's nothing that we do that I think ultimately doesn't have that really exciting sort of innovation impact.
Yeah. I love to steal this quote from Thomas, and he wasn't applying it to Workspace specifically. He's like, I care very little about what's happened in the past. And what he was really pointing to is the market leads or lack thereof that others have in any one category, whether it be cloud, office collaboration suites, or otherwise. When you look at the technology, the artificial intelligence that's being applied to a modern, the new way of working today, like you said, the disconnected clinician or researcher, the fact that they're working in groups and they're doing so virtually, the fact they're doing across continents and globes with hundreds, if not thousands of patients and cohorts and consumers in the mix of the collaboration. What was done in the past and the tools that were used in the past, they're not table stakes. They're actually going to become irrelevant over time. And artificial intelligence-based collaboration tools built for everybody that meets them where they are, I think is ultimately what's going to differentiate Workspace, Google Workspace, from the competition in the future. And I'm very, very excited and confident in that future is very, very bright for our customers who are already on it today. And they're already seeing the benefits. You know, we had one hospital call us up literally in the middle of the pandemic, which they had no time to do, and just say, we are so thankful we moved to Workspace when we did, and they walked us through how they were handling inbound patients coming in with COVID. It was early where people didn't fully grasp the segregation of those patients as they were coming into the hospital from the people that were healthy, or at least coming in for more routine checkups and things like that. And their ability to collaborate real time across workstations, across dozens, if not hundreds of hospitals across their care network. That phone call signaled to me, we're doing something smart, we're doing something right. And that really is the collaborative feature set built on AI is really what's going to differentiate not the product, but those who use it. And I think that's, Michael, is at the core of what you were saying.
Yeah, and I think, look, Workspace was the first thing that healthcare organizations specifically adopted at scale in the enterprise that we saw in the last 14 years. And it was amazing. It almost seemed like overnight. And it seems clear and obvious now because we have so many wins of large healthcare organizations adopting Google Workspace. Whether you go back to, I remember when Genentech was 3,000 employees and Roche was 90,000, and Roche bought Genentech. And then instead of Genentech going Microsoft, all of Roche went Google. Like, that was a crazy conservative European company, very, but then following sort of all the hospital groups one by one, it was sort of like those moments of realization that being regulated and having compliance requirements like HIPAA was no easy task to manage yourself, to then really the cost factor. Like, it was such a tremendous cost savings, and we're able to meet them in their collaboration needs where they were. Hospital workers are not sitting all at a desk, right? They're not like, with two monitors and all. They're running around they have kiosks, they have phones, they have all this other stuff. And the fact that we could meet them and make them all first-class citizens in sort of this new collaboration paradigm was a huge, huge leap. And unfortunately, took the HIPAA regulations and also a few major fines, to get customers to accelerate the adoption of some of these tools and give the hard work of security and compliance to Google to handle at least a big part of it. But now we have a different type of event, which is this sort of global pandemic, which has, clearly made it obvious that we're just we weren't ready for an event like this big. And so how do we then get all these healthcare organizations, payer, provider, life sciences, to approach these things that we're doing as an experiment right now, to accelerate them into production, because they have to realize, like, they now know they must be prepared for anything.
It's funny. There was a quote, Tony. It was a LinkedIn post. Dr. Ferrugia, from the CEO of Mayo, put it out there, and I've used it so many times since then. I hope he doesn't mind. I probably owe him some copyright fees somewhere in here. But I will tell you what I saw in that note. He was basically, as a CEO, my job used to be, to push us forward, to look forward. He's like, now one of the biggest responsibilities I have is to keep us from going back to maintaining that transformational mindset, making sure that not just telehealth visits, but this concept of a digital fusion with our brick and mortar shield, making sure that those things, move forward. And that is our future, because we can see more patients. We can actually reduce the burnout on our clinicians because they can see more with less resource, because you can blend that agentless concept with the in-person clinician, especially when you start thinking about these population health, chronic disease management programs that I think are going to define our economy, not just the digital economy, but our economy globally going forward, which where so much cost is centered. Hearing him say that both on the video and then again, reading it in hard print as the CEO, my job used to be just to take us forward, to set a vision. Now it's to keep us from going back.
Very well.
That to me really crystallized the role and the mindset of future leaders, both today and tomorrow.
Yeah, because inertia is a powerful thing as well in the other direction. Yes. Like that, the sort of recoil is a real thing, and I'm glad he's thinking like that, because it's very easy to settle back down to status quo. But I think that's exactly the mindset that's gotten healthcare kind of where it has been in the past. And, look, the startup community, these different alternative healthcare, alternative life sciences, they're so well funded. They're so progressive. They have no technical debt. They have no qualms about the past. They have no sacred cows. So they're very competitive. And the traditional enterprises that we all support also really have the opportunity to define themselves differently in the future. And it takes the right leadership and bold leadership to take those steps. Now, in our sort of way out of the podcast, I want to ask you both two questions. One is what you're most proud of in the last 9 to 12 months, and what you're excited about in 2021 the most as well. So, Chris, why don't you?
Sure. I think we've talked quite a bit about what I'm most proud of, not only in terms of the industry, but the collaboration that we have had, Tony, during the pandemic. And so I'll hang my hat on that one, and I'll transition to, things I'm most excited about. And by the way, we would need 3 more podcasts and a timer on me to keep me on time for each. But there's just 3 that I'll pick for you that I have been spending a lot of time internally with our leadership team, both the global healthcare leadership team as well as the broader company. Right. The first one's really just this concept. I think the digital front door takes shape. I think we're moving beyond the rhetoric of what a digital front door is. And I think we move with telehealth. And I think we start to connect the virtual care framework with durable programs that focus on population health and individual health. And I think that spans across, all the 4 subverticals of med device manufacturer, pharma, life science, and our healthcare payer and providers. I truly think that will take shape, and you will see telehealth married with these durable programs. And I think that ultimately is here and ready now. And I think we're at the epicenter of that as SADA and Google Cloud. I think the second area I'd pick out is, I think we're past the hype cycle around machine learning and data. And I think we're really seeing it come to fruition now. I think that was one of the wins, if there is any, coming from the pandemic that we got, is that folks really started to think hard, not just about, hey, I've got regulations coming around interoperability, but data isn't just something I need to store and leave for my analysts. You have to democratize it as if it was search, right? And again, that puts it right in our wheelhouse, is the ability to search data, make it actionable and insightful. And I think what you'll see now in this next year, not years from now, is this ability to drive predictive insights that drive next logical action, which immediately brings in AI. And I think you're really going to see a strong framework for artificial intelligence to thread together that digital engagement model in the care continuum, right? The ability to drive insights, both clinical and operational, and the ability to actually deliver it, right? Both with humans and across agentless call centers, workstations, et cetera. And I'm so excited. And I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to turn it to Michael. I had one of my favorite, and it's our shared favorite CIOs down in the southern markets of one of the larger health systems said to me the other just a few weeks ago. He's like, "Hey, Chris, listen. When I think about partnerships and I think about what I'm so excited about from a technology standpoint, he's like, the reason why I stopped reading newspapers is because I was always reading about what happened yesterday." He's like, I would buy more newspapers if I could open them up and it would tell me what to do tomorrow. At least give me a sense, give me the insights to not only make decisions on my own, but actually build in logic that tells me what the next logical recommendation should be. And he goes, by the way, it's not just for our doctors and our nurses. It's for the researchers that we work with. It's for the pharmaceutical companies we engage in our supply chain, our distributors, all the way across the full operations of the companies. And that is really not the future. That's now. That's what's on my plate on the agenda with the board now. And so if you just stitch those three things together, Tony, I'm so excited about that because it's in our wheelhouse. I believe we are not just the thought leaders, but we are the execution leaders in that regard. And I do believe we can bring, that digital framework together with partnerships like SADA. So very, very excited about that for 2021.
It is exciting. It is the wheelhouse. It's what Google does best. We do the other stuff well too, and the foundational work, we still have to win there, but that is definitely very few companies can do what Google does in that area, especially with all the other healthcare investments around Alphabet. Michael Ames.
Yeah, I'm going to answer in the opposite order because I want to launch off of what Chris was saying about AI and being past the hype cycle. People have asked me for a long time, when will we have AI integrated with clinicians making care decisions for patients? And the truth is we actually have it now. There's a lot of that's happening that you're not seeing that are integrations with medical record systems that are providing assistance and advice to doctors and helping to diagnose your conditions. But most people are really thinking about, when do we get to the point where we're really offloading that from the doctor and the computer can help to identify the medicine that I need better than the doctor can? And my answer is, you will be ready for that about the same time that you arrive at the hospital in a self-driving car. And the reason is, at the point when we as a society are ready to entrust our safety to the artificial brain of that self-driving car, we will also be ready to trust our health to an artificial brain that's there augmenting the work of a real doctor, right? And so I've been watching that time frame. Now, I remember a few years ago when folks were saying we're all going to be in artificial cars by 2020. That ship has sailed, but it's getting closer. And I think that we are getting closer and closer to the point where we are going to be able to help doctors to focus really on the creative problem-solving part of their work, and less so on the just sort of mundane looking at symptoms and helping to apply, sort of a textbook kind of solution to them. Let's let the machines do that. Let's let the doctors do the really hard creative part. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that all the time. And that's exciting.
Yeah, and Michael, you certainly are seeing it in the payer side. Right, you're seeing they're letting the computer, they're letting the machine learning algorithms and the artificial intelligence making decisions on claims to lower the cost of the claim. You don't need a human being to reason over whether this treatment should be approved or not approved, especially when it's specialty. And so those partnerships that we have with some of the larger payer systems out there, I think is really going to pay dividends in terms of the impact on the GDP. And you see the same thing in drug discovery. They're letting the computers cull through all of that data, all those medical journals, those hundreds of thousands of years of worth of data that they've compiled, and say, bring back the most relevant information to me. You're not displacing the data scientist, the doctor, or the claims agent. You're just making them more efficient because they can deal with the hardest cases, while the ones that should just be reasoned over quickly, we can get into that rhythm. And I think that's ultimately where we really will have the biggest impact on the economy, Michael, no doubt.
Yeah. Love it. I think that's a great example. Then, Tony, to your first question about what am I most proud of? I remember a day back in mid-March or so when the closeness, the sort of proximity of the pandemic was really hitting home, because events were getting canceled, schools were talking about canceling, churches, businesses, and we didn't know what was happening, and things were happening really quick. And I remember a day when I thought, this is really real, and it's really going to be part of my life. And I'm not sure what that means yet, but it is. And it was literally the next day that I got pulled into calls at SADA and Google on a number of immediately forming and pressing transformational initiatives that we were going to start pushing through in order to try to bring forward some help and some response to this pandemic. It was 24 hours before the idea hit me, we have a problem here. And when this ecosystem that I'm a part of had completely aligned around, let us see what we can do here to help. And at no point in those conversations for the months that followed was the conversation in any way the sort of cynical, let's see how we can use the pandemic to figure out how to drive business. It was always, as Chris said, service before sales. It was always a sense of what is the greater good that we can do? How can we take this magical technology that we've got at our disposal and put it to use to try to help this human race make it through this entirely unplanned biological disaster? And I am so proud to be part of an organization and an ecosystem and an industry that is set up around that. Let's figure out how to do what is right because we have the power to do it.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Very well said. Very well put. It's exactly why we wake up excited every single day that we get to have an impact, work alongside with like-minded people with a similar culture and vision, and with just amazing capacity to deliver value. And that's everything that we get out of our partnership with Google Cloud. And Chris, I mean, all the work in healthcare, life sciences, Michael, you know this too, this is GDP impacting work. And it's healthcare outcome impacting work. And look, in this country, in the US, we have a lot of work to do. And the trick is getting the right value to the right decision makers at old, sometimes conservative organizations to sort of let us do the work. But I think it's never been more compelling. It's never been easier, and it's never been as safe to go on this journey with us and with Google Cloud, especially with the leadership from Thomas and Rob and everyone else that supports our vision every day and the investments required to keep going. So I want to thank you all for being my guests. Chris Sakalosky, Michael Ames. Always great to have two guests. It's rare, but definitely changes the conversation and makes it a lot more exciting. And it was a great pleasure. Look forward to a great 2021 together. And thanks for last year, and a lot more to come this year and in the future.
Thanks, Chris. A lot of fun.
Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.